All right, so UFC 209. And TJ, again, I do want your scorecard at the end of this conversation. I didn't get to hear beatdown after the bell. Tyron Woodley, Stephen Wonderboy Thompson. Woodley wins it by majority decision, 48-47 times 2. One judge had it a 47-47 draw. I hate the word robbery, Kenny. And, you know, Gabe Killian, who made picks on our show last week, was one of the few guys out there that referred to this as a robbery, which it most certainly wasn't. Close fight. Oftentimes we have said when you get to the truly elite levels and there is mutual respect for what is coming back offensively, sometimes fights can play out like this. And when it plays out like this over 25 minutes and there isn't a whole lot of offense, it can leave a lot to be desired, especially in this situation on the heels of what was just an absolute classic turned in by these two men back in November. Ultimately, I thought that this, largely by Tyron Woodley, was the right approach. Not necessarily the right approach to swell your fan base and entertain the masses, but you know how difficult a challenge Stephen Wonderboy Thompson is, and you have to figure out a way to minimize his long-range weapons and minimize the damage. I thought Tyron Woodley did that. I don't know how I scored the fight. I will say, though, off the top, that I don't think Stephen Wonderboy Thompson got very much done in this fight, Kenny, and he has now fought Woodley for 50 minutes and has landed less than 30% of his total strikes overall. Even though he was the advancing party at times, I feel like when I look at the totality of this fight, Tyron Woodley, in my opinion, again, just my opinion, got more done and deserved to leave as the UFC welterweight champion.
Well, you know, I got to say that, yeah, absolutely. You cannot call this a robbery. When you get a fight that's this close or there wasn't a whole lot of action, you can't say it was a robbery either way. Neither fighter can be pissed off about this result, period. And I think you said it really well. You know, for Tyron Woodley, he fought Wonderboy in the safest, best way he could. That was the way he was going to raise his chances of becoming or defending the belt and beating Thompson. And I feel like for Thompson, he wasn't throwing enough offense. When he was advancing, he wasn't throwing anything down the middle. The side kick was non-existent, essentially. He didn't throw that front kick, that snap kick down the middle or to the face. He didn't throw a lot of roundhouses to the head of Tyron Woodley either. When he did, he was pretty effective. And the same thing goes for Tyron Woodley, who, you know, in 50 minutes, he shot twice on the legs of Stephen Wonderboy Thompson. He took him down both times. He was 2 for 2 with takedowns. Those takedowns were non-existent. He didn't attempt a lot of them. I'm not sure exactly why. Because if you're not going to throw a lot of offense striking-wise, how about a couple shots? And he didn't do that. But, again, it's very difficult to fight a guy like Wonderboy who makes you fight his long-range kicking game. And, you know, I thought Woodley was conservative in his approach. He was very careful, as he should be against a phenomenal striker and Stephen Wonderboy Thompson. But it was one of those matches where when you have two counter strikers, both were trying to play that game, and both were extremely patient throughout. So, you know, we didn't see a whole lot of action. The best action that we saw was from Tyron Woodley. When he decided to counter and move forward and press the action and take it to Wonderboy, he hurt him, and he hurt him very badly. And that's another reason why Wonderboy wasn't moving forward. He was afraid of the takedown. He was afraid of that overhand right.
Right. Now, some of that fear injected in because of the way that first fight went down, and Stephen Wonderboy Thompson absorbing more power shots at UFC 205 than he had in his previous 8 or 9 UFC fights combined. Now, Kenny, Tyron Woodley could have paid for this approach, and he could have paid the ultimate price by heading back to Missouri without his UFC welterweight championship. So there was some risk, obviously, in not being super offensive for Tyron Woodley. He's never been a guy who has wowed you with volume. He's never been a guy who has won based upon throwing a whole lot of volume. But I feel like, thank God he answered Duke Rufus's imperative there in that 5th and final round, or likely he could be going home without the UFC title. I felt like rounds 1 and 2 essentially were a wash. Round 3 was close, but Woodley certainly put the finishing touches on it with the takedown and then the body work there. So round 3, Woodley. Round 5, undeniably, was Tyron Woodley's. I think round 4 goes to Stephen Wonderboy Thompson. But, I mean, those first 10 minutes, man, just nothing really happening. And I don't know that, you know, whether you score 10-10 or 10-9 one way or the other, or you go 9-9, I don't know exactly what the right approach is. But, Kenny, when we're starting that 3rd round, I mean, how did you have it? A lot of people seem to have it 20-18 for Stephen Wonderboy Thompson. I really didn't see much difference between what either guy did in round 1 and round 2.
And that's the problem. That's why it was very difficult to score. I mean, for me, honestly, you know, we're talking about the fight in the green room at Fox, and we're going, who the hell's winning this fight? There's just, how do you decipher between 1 and 2 punches? You know, honestly, and I don't mean that disrespectfully, but there just wasn't a whole lot of action. So, you know, it was a very risky move by both fighters in some way. It was risky in that they knew they were going to the judges. They were fighting for the points win, which is always very dangerous. You know, they just didn't go for it enough. So I think they were rolling the dice in that regard. They were very conservative in not getting knocked out. So in there, they were playing it safe. But as far as letting it go to the judges, they were rolling the dice. And, you know, I don't fault Tyron Woodley for his approach, really. I might have been, I don't know if people were saying I was harsh on him in the post-fight show. I commend him. There's very few people on the planet that can beat a guy like Stephen Wonderboy Thompson. Winning is one thing. He has absolutely every single right to fight any way he wants to get that win. I 100% agree. The problem is he can't go out there and say, you know, I'm the best welterweight of all time, or, you know, expect people to want to buy the pay-per-view every single time if he fights that way. You know, so it's a balancing act, man. And listen, you know, Brian Stan said it very well in the post-fight show. Anderson Silva had a lot of crappy fights as well. You know, we can't forget the fight against Damian Maia, Talis Leches, Patrick Cote. You know, he had a lot of weird fights, and he was still considered the greatest fighter of all time by a lot of people. And, you know, you look at how Tyron Woodley won the belt. He knocked out Robbie Lawler very quickly, had an amazing fight with Stephen Wonderboy Thompson last fight out. It was a draw, but it was a wonderful fight. And this time around, it was kind of a stinker action-wise. But at the end of the day, that kid still has a strap.
And he also turned around quickly for the promotion, right? This was less than 4 months removed from an absolute war with Wonderboy. You know, this first quarter has been a little bit lean in terms of pay-per-view headliners. Some champions are idle, some are out due to injury. Promotion needed a headliner here for UFC 209, and Tyron Woodley absolutely stepped up. You're right, though. The approach did not dovetail with everything he was saying during fight week, that Wonderboy's not going to win a round from me. I'm definitely going to get finality this time around. I'm going to finish him this time around. And I'm going to leave as the consensus greatest welterweight of all time, or continue to work towards that legacy. So this performance, a little bit of a bump in the road if you're trying to become the greatest welterweight of all time. But again, not a lot of people are going to be beating Stephen Wonderboy Thompson, right? This is still a guy who has not been finished in mixed martial arts. And maybe a guy like Damian Maia will be the first to do so, right? Because he'll, in theory, be able to close the distance, get inside. And when a guy like Maia takes you down, if he does so early in the round, you have a hard time hearing that horn and not getting submitted. So maybe Maia's the guy to do it, but Tyron Woodley is still the champion. And it's tricky, right? Because there are going to be a lot of naysayers regardless of what you do. But I think it's important to bring up Anderson Silva, and that, you know, there are going to be clunkers, especially when there are championship stakes. And obviously their first fight was a tough act to follow. As far as Stephen Wonderboy Thompson is concerned here, Kenny, added some muscle mass, certainly was the aggressor in the fight. You know, let me just take round 1, and I don't want to get too deep into the scoring, but so the new scoring criteria and judging criteria was not in effect here by the Nevada State Athletic Commission. I still think you're going to see judges, though, be more liberal with these 10-8s now going forward, even if the new scoring criteria hasn't been adopted, because they have it in the back of their minds that 10-9s now are supposed to be reserved for close rounds. But you take round 1. Just those 5 minutes, okay? If you cannot determine a winner based upon effective striking and grappling, then you go to aggression. And if you can't determine a winner based upon who's more aggressive when neither guy gets anything done, then you go to octagon control. So for round 1, as far as I'm concerned, neither guy was effective striking nor grappling. So you have to go to aggression and then maybe octagon control. And because Wonderboy Kenny was the guy advancing, moving forward, pressing the action, on those merits, I think you do give Stephen Wonderboy Thompson round 1. Yeah?
I agree. He's the guy moving forward. Again, he wasn't throwing a lot of offense striking-wise, but he was the guy moving forward. He was kind of trapping Tyron Woodley a little bit up against the cage. Tyron was the one who was kind of going off of that forward movement of Wonderboy Thompson. So based on the rules, yeah, Wonderboy would have won that round.
Okay, so let's say you go 10-9 Wonderboy in round 1. And again, no issue if you go 10-10 or 9-9. I don't even know which one you're supposed to score there. But so let's say you go 10-9 Stephen Wonderboy Thompson round 1. There's no way that round 5 can only be 10-9 Tyron Woodley. Now, I would agree with Dana White. I don't necessarily think, based upon the old scoring, that round 5 was a 10-8 for Tyron Woodley, because he didn't largely dominate the round. It was only that final flurry, but it was much more dominant than any of the previous 4 rounds. So if round 5, if that's how round 1 had played out, you're giving that one 10-9 to Woodley. But then you get to the 5th round, you got 4 rounds in the can. They've all been relatively close. I don't know. I mean, I don't even know what the question is, but do you understand what I'm trying to say?
I totally know what you're trying to say. And that's why this fight was so hard to score. You know, in the 5th round, it was close to a 10-8, man. I mean, anytime someone gets knocked down like that, I mean, he got his knees buckled. Then he went down. He was messed up. I mean, that was a big shot from Tyron Woodley. He landed a flurry at the end. The problem is that for like 4 minutes and 30 seconds or 4 minutes and 15 seconds, there wasn't a whole lot going on before that. So it's just really difficult, scoring that kind of fight. And those guys had so much respect for each other. It was a very tactical fight. There just wasn't a whole lot of action going on. So you judge a fight based on action. So that's what made it so difficult.
All right, and the final thing that I will say, this antiquated notion that in order to be the champion, you have to beat the champion. Yeah. It's absolutely absurd. I don't know how you feel about this, Kenny, but the point is, right, people who trot this tired line out there are basically suggesting that when a judge is looking at a singular round, that if it's close, you give it to the champion and not the challenger, which is absolutely absurd. It has nothing to do with mixed martial arts, nothing to do with the sport modern day. How do you feel about the line, to be the champ, you've got to beat the champ? I mean, judges, that's the last thing they're thinking about.
Yeah, I think it's a bunch of baloney, man. It's always been a bullshit line that I hear, and I just eye roll every single time I hear it on the internet or someone says that to me. It's ridiculous. Who won the round? That's all it is. That's all they're trying to score is who was the better man in that round. Period. Then you move on to the next. Do the exact same thing. In no way, shape, or form are they going, well, this guy is the champ and blah, blah, blah.
Right.
You know what I mean? Sometimes it can work for guys, perhaps like a big name, a guy that has been around forever, that has held the belt for a long time. But they're not thinking because the champ, you need to beat the champ overwhelmingly round by round by round. No, that's not the way it goes. Otherwise, it's just not the case. We heard that in boxing a lot, and it's kind of transferred over to mixed martial arts. It's a bunch of bullshit.
Yeah, it makes absolutely no sense. And hopefully people who are of that line of thinking and listening to this conversation understand why it just carries no weight whatsoever. So last thing I'll say, Tyron Woodley, your winner by majority decision. I really believe the man who deserved to win the fight and leave with the belt did. And again, that's just one man's opinion.